We're excited to have you join us for the Come Follow Me 2021 podcast and study of the Doctrine and Covenants, hosted by Rod Meldrum and Jonathan Neville, and presented by Gospel Doctrine Answers. In today's podcast, we will study Doctrine and Covenants 14 through 17. Stand as a witness.
Welcome, everybody, to our this week's podcast, and we are excited about having some supplemental material to give for you here. And this is lesson number 8. This is the Doctrine and Covenants sections 14 through 17. Right. We have Jonathan Neville. He's been on almost all of the, most of the podcasts so far. That we've had. Several. And he is our resident expert on church history and just really has some fascinating information. So 2 weeks ago, we had we kind of left him with a little bit of a cliffhanger.
Yeah, a little mystery. That's right.
And would you like to kind of explain what the mystery was about, and then we're going to jump into how the unraveling of the mystery.
Unraveling of the mystery.
Yes.
Okay, we do have. Well, we'll do a quick review because it was 2 weks ago.
Yes. Yeah.
But first, I just want to mention the opening of this Doctrine and Covenants lessons, section 14 through 17, and it says Joseph Smith's family and friends sometimes asked him to seek revelation about God wanted them to do. And as you read these revelations, consider what direction God has for you. So that's the emphasis of the lesson. Consider what direction God has for you. And we want to emphasize for everyone listening that God will give you direction in your life too. And you have to seek it. In most cases, sometimes he'll hit you on the head. You have to seek his direction and be willing to do it, like President Nelson talked about. Gathering of Israel is those who will, submit to God and want to be guided by God in their lives. And this lesson is a really wonderful example of it. And maybe not in the way you think. And that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to talk about here. So the first thing to notice is,
2 weeks ago we talked about.
We're going to get to it.
Okay. There we go.
So the lesson manual has a little bit of a historical account. Mm-hmm. And it says here, I'm just going to highlight a little section here. It says, feeling that harmony was no longer safe, Oliver reached out to a friend who had expressed interest in Joseph's work, David Whitmer. That's just one little sentence in this lesson, and it's going to be an enormously important event in church history. Mm-hmm. So, like Rod said, we want to go back 2 weeks ago and just a quick review.
Yeah.
So if you remember, Joseph and Oliver were down in Harmony, Pennsylvania, translating the abridged plates that Joseph got from the stone box, Moroni stone box of the Hill.
So this is the regular set of gold plates that everybody's aware of.
Everybody talks about, but they were the abridged plates. And as this diagram shows, this is what was in Moroni's stone box that Joseph took to Harmony. It was the abridged plates of the record of people of Nephi, abridged part of Ether, Moroni's original writings, and then the sealed part of Ether that Moroni rewrote. And then there was a title page. And the title page, which Joseph said was on the last leaf of the plates, was like a table of contents. Mm-hmm. And this is what it listed.
Yep.
That's all that was in there. So when they got to the end, they said, well, maybe we should retranslate. That's what you would think, right?
Why not? I mean, it's 116 pages. They were lost. Let's just redo it.
Retranslate it again.
Yeah.
And so they considered that, but the Lord said no. The Lord said not to do that. And instead,
in sections 10.
This is in section 10. Yep. The Lord told them to translate the plates of Nephi. And it's 5 times in section 10. It reemphasizes that. Translate the engravings on the plates of Nephi. So the problem was, well, here's from section 10. This was a lesson 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And it says, you shall translate the engravings which are on the plates of Nephi, and so on. We don't need to rehash all that.
Yeah.
The problem they had was the plates of Nephi were still back in the repository in Cumorah.
They didn't have the plates of Nephi.
Yeah,
so how are they supposed to translate plates that they don't have? Were never in the original gold plates.
You can read right in the table of contents on the title page. There's nothing about any plates of Nephi. It was only abridged records.
Yeah.
So they faced a little bit of a dilemma. The Lord had told Oliver Cowdery in section 9 that there would be additional records for him to help translate. Section 10, the Lord says, here's the additional records. It's the plates of Nephi. And you guys don't even have them yet. So what are they supposed to do?
Well, that was kind of the fulfillment, like you said, about earlier.
Yeah, it was a fulfillment of section 9, and it gave them the answer, but it didn't really provide them the means to do it.
Right.
And I think it's kind of like in 1 Nephi, when the Lord told Nephi, I'll go and do the things as the Lord commanded, because He'll prepare a way for it to happen, right?
But let me throw out another little caveat, though. If the translation of this set of plates was done primarily with the stone in the hat,
Right.
the Sith theory, why do they even need to have plates? I mean, why can just say, just look back into the hat and I'll put on the stone, but everything you need, and just go ahead and just do that. So you don't even have to worry about any small plates or anything else. We can just do it with the stone.
Well, I think most of the people watching here know that the stone in the hat thing is bogus. but it is. We talked about that earlier, that they did Joseph Smith actually did a demonstration with the stone in the hat.
Right.
And so people took that, inferred that was a translation. But it's clear throughout the scriptures that Joseph actually did the translation with the Urim and Thummim.
Yeah.
And so here, but you make a good point that if the Lord told them to translate the plates of Nephi and they didn't need the plates of Nephi, then there was no issue. They didn't need any plates.
Right.
But instead, the plates of Nephi were back in the repository.
Yeah.
So it comes up here. Remember, we talked about this also 2 weeks ago, that in June, Joseph and Oliver translated the small plates in Fayette. So the question is, how do they get those small plates?
Yeah.
How do they get the plates of Nephi? So here we go. This reiterates this, that they got it. I must have done that back. Now remember, this is what it said in the lesson. We just read this at the beginning. Mm-hmm. It says, feeling that harmony was no longer safe, Oliver reached out to a friend who had expressed interest in Joseph's work, David Whitmer. Is that really what happened? In a way, it kind of is.
Oliver reached out.
Oliver did reach out. It wasn't
John Smith that reached out, according to this. It was Oliver that reached out.
And he was feeling it wasn't safe. Well, here's what the historical record is.
Yeah, this is an important difference.
This is really important.
Yeah.
And you can go in the Joseph Smith papers and read this for yourself. But Lucy Mack Smith did a history of the life of Joseph Smith. It's been published. There's one version. There's several versions of it.
So you can get these at Deseret Book or whatever. This is the collector's edition.
Right. And you can also, we'll put a link probably on the podcast here at the end, right to the Joseph Smith. You can read this yourself. I just put a picture of Lucy here, along with a picture of the actual manuscript. It wasn't her handwriting, but she dictated it. It was the Corres that wrote it. But here's what she said. She was talking about another situation, and she went on to say, except an intimation that was given to Joseph Smith, as she was talking about, through the Urim and Thummim, for as he, Joseph, one morning applied the latter to his eyes to look upon the record. So in the morning, he would get up,
get the Urim and Thummim, put the spectacles on.
Yeah, put the spectacles on, whether he held them on, but it says applied the latter to his eyes. Now, we're told there was a little stem on them.
Right.
That he could fit them on, and they would stay on there so he could use his hands to turn the plates. But he applied them to his eyes, and why did he apply them to his eyes? To look on the record.
Yeah.
And the record was the plates. So he applied the latter to his eyes to look on the record. Instead of the words of the book being given to him, now that's the process of studying it out in your mind and asking the Lord and so on. Instead of having the words of the book or the translation being given,
working on that part,
he was commanded to write a letter to one David Whitmer. So this was not Oliver Cowdery's idea. It wasn't Joseph Smith's idea. It was the Lord's idea.
Through the Urim and Thummim.
Through the Urim and Thummim.
To write to this David Whitmer. But who was David Whitmer?
Well, we're going to see.
It's really interesting.
It is. It's fascinating.
Because this name comes up here.
Right. The Lord told him, write a letter to David Whitmer. Then she went on to say, this man Joseph had never seen. But he was instructed to say to him, she wrote, but say to him that he must come, David, must come with his team, his wagon and team of horses, immediately, in order to convey Joseph and his family, Oliver Cowdery, back to his house, David's house, which was 135 miles away, and that they might remain there with him until the translation should be completed. So, just to recap this, the idea is that every day Joseph would get up to look on the plates with the Urim and Thummim. One day he does it. Now, there were some other times where he would get a revelation that way.
Yeah,
as we've
he actually saw
DNC 9,
some other
DNC
things
10.
later on when David was actually coming down.
That's right, yeah.
And said every morning, he basically put on the spectacles and he would see certain things.
Yeah.
This was when that was kind of interrupted the translation process.
He was
said,
expecting to translate, and instead he got this commandment to write to David Whitmer, who he'd never met.
Yeah.
So Oliver Cowdery says, I know David Whitmer. I've met him. In fact, I stopped at his house. And the other interesting thing is he had written at least 2 letters to David Whitmer while he was in Harmony before this. And he was telling, because David said, well, tell me what's going on when you go down there. And so he had written these letters. We don't have those letters, which we did. We don't have the letters, but we do have Lucy Mack's account here. Mm-hmm. So everyone probably knows the story of the farm because David Whitmer. So, this points out that it was Oliver.
So Oliver writes the letter. Sends it off.
David Whitmer gets it. He's in the middle of the plowing and harvest, or not harvesting, but plowing and sowing seeds and stuff.
Yeah.
And this is a scene from the film that the church put out about the miraculous plowing of his field, the miraculous fertilizing of his field that allowed him to immediately go down to pick up Joseph and Oliver.
Which also convinced his father. His father was like, you know what? We're right in the middle of this. This is our livelihood. This is life and death for us. If we don't get the crop in the ground on time, then we won't have a crop in the end of the summer. So you really can't go. But then after this happened, I think God wants us to go. You better
and David's
go.
Sister said it was 3 men that were sowing the fertilizer stuff.
Says, who are those 3 guys out there playstering, they called it at the time.
Right. Yeah. So it's an awesome example in church history of where Joseph Smith received a commandment that seemed a little strange to him because he didn't even know this guy.
Yeah.
And yet he fulfilled it. And here David Whitmer gets the letter, and it seems, well, there's no way I can do that. And then the Lord provided a way. And then he did.
It just happens to be these 3 guys. I just think find it interesting that there was 3 Nephites who were told that they were going to be around. I mean, where would they be?
That's right.
But maybe hanging around, making sure that things were getting in place. And that may come up later too, possibly.
Just possibly.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, but this is the kind of both of these accounts: Joseph's faith in just having Oliver write a letter to a guy he didn't know, and David Whitmer's faith being willing to do it but unable because of his circumstances. So the Lord intervened just enough that the Lord didn't. Here's an interesting example. The Lord did not convey the wagon to Harmony, right? Because David could do that on his own.
Yeah.
But he did have the 3 Nephites come and plow the field because David couldn't have done that.
Yeah.
He could not have done that on his own. So the Lord will do things for us that we can't do on our own. But anything we can do ourselves, he expects us to do. For example, reading the scriptures and understanding all this stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly.
Then David goes down, picks him up. Now here's another key point. Before he left Harmony, Joseph Smith gave the plates to what he said was a heavenly messenger.
So this is now getting into the answer to the question 2 weeks ago. What happened to this set of plates? And the ones that were in the stone box, where did those end up?
Yeah, and if you read in Joseph Smith history in the Pearl of Great Price, he says, by prior arrangement, I gave the plates to a messenger. And that's what he did right here.
Well, Joseph was in kind of a bad situation there, as I understand it, because essentially if he leaves there and he has the plates with him, they know that there's people who are looking for them on the roads.
That could be part of it.
Could be dangerous. And then also he would have to leave the plates, which he has, it's his commission in his life to take care of these plates.
Right.
He can't just leave them with somebody either. So he's got this kind of dilemma. So the Lord also created a way for him to not have to take the plates with him in the wagon.
Well, basically he asked the Lord, he said, what am I going to do with the plates?
Right.
And the Lord answered him and said to give them to the messenger. Yeah. So the messenger shows up, they meet in the woods, he gives them the plates. And then later on David Whitmer shows up. So here's where Lucy Mack talked about it. It says, when Joseph commenced making preparations for the journey, he inquired of the Lord to know in what manner he should carry the plates, because he thought he was supposed to carry the plates with him.
Kind of like in the barrel of beans.
Right.
Yeah.
His answer was he should commit them into the hands of an angel for their safety, and then when he should arrive at Whitmer's, the angel would deliver them again into his hands. So that's how this was all framed. The Lord said, give them to this guy, he's okay. I can certify this guy's okay. So he did, and then when he got to Fayette, he got plates back from the messenger. were they the same place or not? That's what we're going to check out here.
Okay, let's find out.
So David Whitmer, this is the scenario we've looked at before. Harmony is in the lower right, and then you have the path. There's a couple of ways they could have gone up.
There was a kind of a wagon path, as I understand.
Yeah, there's a couple roads.
And one of the reasons why they had to go kind of way up into the east is because there was a portage to get across the river in a wagon.
Yeah,
but a guy on foot could actually cross the Susquehanna River. It's not that big. He could.
Well, they didn't have to cross the Susquehanna River because that was south. But anyway,
yeah. But basically,
there's rivers.
They could have taken
ravines,
a different route.
Yeah, totally.
If they didn't have to be on an actual wagon route.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there's lots of alternative ways they could have gone. We don't know where they went, but while they were on this wagon, somewhere between Harmony and Fayette, this is David Whitmer saying this. When I was returning to Fayette with Joseph and Oliver, all of us riding in the wagon. Now, this isn't actually a picture of David Whitmer in the wagon. This is representative.
It's just a wagon.
It's just a wagon. So don't say this is David Whitmer.
Drawn by horses, yeah, okay.
But this is roughly what it would look like. So Oliver and David were on the old-fashioned wooden spring seat, and Joseph was sitting behind him in the back.
In the box, yeah.
They were suddenly approached by a very pleasant, nice-looking old man in a clear, open place. Now, I've driven back and forth between here many times, and there's lots of hills, there's lots of woods, but there are some plains, some fields. Mm-hmm. So this was in a clear, open place. So they saw him at some distance, and the man saluted him and said, "Good morning, it's very warm." And he wiped his forehead with his hand. So that's how much detail. This is how clearly David Whitmer remembered this incident. The dude wiped his hand,
wiped
his face with his hand. Then we returned the salutation, and by a sign from Joseph, I invited him to ride with us in the wagon if he was going our way. But he said very pleasantly, "No, I'm going to Cumorah."
Wait a minute. The old guy says, "I'm going to
the guy.
Cumorah."
The old man says, "I'm going to Cumorah." David Whitmer says, "This was something new to me. I did not know what Cumorah meant." And you have to remember, David Whitmer was a farmer in this area. He knew the area pretty well. But at this time, he'd never heard of Cumorah. The only two people in that wagon who had heard of Cumorah were Joseph and Oliver, because they had just translated the Book of Mormon and the Book of Moroni and so on.
Yeah.
So David Whitmer was puzzled. He looked inquiringly at Joseph, and the man disappeared. Now, does it mean he vanished, or does it mean he walked off while he turned around, whatever.
Yeah.
But he did not see him again. So that was one interview that David Whitmer gave. We're going to look at some more.
This is such an odd little story that's been in church history, and I remember even in these church history books, it has. I still remember the picture that they have in there, and everything about that. And I always kind of wondered, what's the significance?
Exactly.
I mean, how many times did they ever talk about just running into somebody on the side of the road?
Exactly.
It had to happen all the time.
And what I love...
quite often, you would think.
Yeah, what I really love about this, one of the things when I practice law, when you interview witnesses and stuff, everybody has a different memory of everything. But when they can remember specific details, like wiping his forehead, or he remembered... The guy said, "I'm going to Cumorah because it's the first time I ever heard that word." And later on in his life, of course, it became a big issue. But he remembered it was something new to him. That's an indicia of credibility and reliability. Because whenever a witness can say, "Oh, yeah, I remember that happened because it was the day I got married," or "I remember that happened because it's when my son was born," whatever.
Yeah.
That's the kind of a thing that is a very strong indication of accuracy and a solid memory. And that's what we have here. But he didn't only say it once. I'm going to show you some more. Okay. But here's an artist depiction. And I really like this.
The artist?
It was one of Ryan's friends. I can't remember her name. But she did a nice job with this because it has the essentials right here.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get carried away with highfalutin art and all that. Yeah. This is an illustration that depicts it. So you have Joseph in the back, Oliver and David in the front, the guy with his backpack on. Yeah. And he says, "No, I don't want to ride with you guys. I'm not going to Cumorah."
But if they were going up in that general area, why wouldn't they want to ride with him?
I'll show you in a sec. Okay, so here we don't know where it is, but it was somewhere roughly around where this circle is, because he had a head start, right? Mm-hmm. So it would have been down the road. Now, if you're in this area, you know that there's a lot of different trails and things going up here, but for this messenger to go to Cumorah, it would make sense that he would meet before getting up by Seneca Lake, so he could go around the bottom of the lake and up.
Yeah, go up on that side.
Yeah, go up on that side. Maybe it was safer. Maybe it was shorter. Actually, it was shorter.
Yeah, it would be shorter to get to Cumorah.
And you wouldn't be going through as much populated area. So who knows why he didn't go. But the point is, he said, I'm not going your way, I'm going to Cumorah.
Yeah, but really, I mean, who cares about this guy, right? I mean, why? I mean, the guy, they says hi, it's a nice day, and then he walks off, and that was... So why is this even...
Well, here's what happened. So he goes
up... The fact that he's going to Cumorah, but why is he going to Cumorah?
Okay, here's what it is. Joseph F. Smith, who interviewed David Whitmer, said, did you notice his appearance? And he said, yeah, he was, I should think I did. He was about 5'9" or 5'10", heavy set, about a man as James Van Cleef, who was one of the people there at the interview, but heavier. So he wasn't thin like you and me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Like you.
Yeah, but heavy set, okay. And heavier than James Van Cleef. So that probably made James Van Cleef feel a little better.
Yeah, no doubt.
Because he said he was heavy set like that guy, but he was heavier than that. Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So that his face was as large, whatever that means, but he was dressed in a suit of brown woolen clothes. And his beard was not, or his hair and beard were white, presumably even more white than mine. And about like Brother Pratt's. If you've seen Orson Pratt, he had a pretty big beard.
Really white, yeah.
So his beard wasn't as heavy as Orson Pratt, but he had a beard. David said, I also remember that he had a sort of knapsack on his back, and something was in it which was shaped like a book. Shaped like a book. It was the messenger who had the plates. So David knew, and how did he know?
Well, Joseph must have told him.
Yeah, he did. Joseph told him. So we show here's the summary of this. It says, Joseph gave the abridged plates to the messenger before he left Harmony. They met the messenger on the road, said he was going to Cumorah. So why would the messenger take the abridged plates from Harmony to Cumorah? It was out of the way. You can see from that map, it was further north and west. So why would he take the plates to Cumorah if he was supposed to take them up to Fayette?
Why didn't he just twinkle them to someplace else?
Twinkle them. But even setting aside the magic stuff, why didn't he just take a ride, right?
Yeah.
Some people could say, well, because it was dangerous on the wagon, so he had to walk. Okay, that's fine. But still, he would walk directly to Fayette. He wouldn't detour to Cumorah before coming to Fayette if he was just taking the plates. Now, I've seen some church historians have totally changed this history. And they've actually written that the messenger took the plates to Fayette. They omit the whole Cumorah thing. And it's appalling because that story doesn't even make sense anyway, because they would have just ridden with them. Anyway, so we're asking the question.
And what difference would it have made if he had taken? Let's assume that this messenger had this set of plates,
right,
and he was taking them up there. What difference would it have made at that point? These plates were all done.
Right.
They've translated everything there is to translate
that's an
these
excellent
plates.
Point. Yeah.
So that it wouldn't make any sense for them to bring these set of plates back up to Fayette.
That's right.
He had to go.
So that's why
Cumorah.
The question is, why would he take those plates to Cumorah?
Yeah, what was in Cumorah that these plates would want to be there for?
That's because the plates of Nephi, right? The plates of Nephi were in the repository in the hill Cumorah. We showed that in the diagrams. But that's why, when we talked about DNC 10...
And what would make sense for the Lord to store these plates in the meantime, too? I mean, these plates had to be stored somewhere.
Yeah, you had to put them back in the repository. Sure.
So it made sense that he was taking these back to put them into the Nephite repository, where they would be then safe with all of the other records.
Yep.
And then at the same time, he could then go pick up
the plates of Nephi.
Which Moroni said that he set them with his, or Mormon said he set them with his other record.
Right.
So they're probably there on the table.
They were available, right.
Right.
I like to say that, no matter what, let's say Martin Harris had lost King Benjamin's address or something instead. The original was in the repository. So they could, no matter what was lost, if anything was lost, I don't think Martin Harris was predestined to lose the 116 pages. Mm-hmm. He had free agency to do that. Joseph had free agency to give it to him. It wasn't a predestination thing. But if Martin Harris had lost King Benjamin's address, if they had lost, the record of the people of Limhi or something, no matter what was lost, the original was still there. Yeah. So there was always backup. It was a perfect plan. In this case, it happened
The Lord
to be...
has a backup plan.
Right.
Is what you're saying.
In this case, it happened to be the 116 pages. But remember, Joseph didn't translate the entire plates of Nephi either. He only translated up until the King Benjamin stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There was more in there, apparently.
Yeah.
So he didn't do that. So anyway, plates of Nephi were in the repository. The messenger goes back to the repository. Now, here's a couple more accounts. I'll go through them kind of quickly, but where David Whitmer was relating this account. So on this one, he says, while thus writing, an aged-looking old man, a little slightly different, came walking along, putting his hand on the wagon bed. This time he remembers that detail. Mm-hmm. He had on his back a knapsack, and the strap crossed on his breast. He took his handkerchief, wiped his face to remove the sweat. As it seemed to them, David, who was driving his team, said to the man, will you get up and ride? No, he said, I am only going over to Cumorah. Now that's interesting because he says he's going over to Cumorah. And suddenly disappeared. They stopped the team at the sudden disappearance of the fine-looking stranger. He says they all felt strangely. They asked the prophet to inquire of the Lord who the stranger was. Of course, Joseph already knew because he'd given him the plates.
He probably recognized him, yeah.
Soon David turned around, and Joseph looked pale, almost transparent, and said that was one of the Nephites, and he had the plates of the Book of Mormon in the knapsack.
So that book he was seeing was actually the plates. There we go.
After their arrival home meaning the Whitmer farm in Fayette, they felt the influence of the same personage around them. This is the same personage that was one of the Nephites, not Moroni. It was one of these personages around them, for he said there was a heavenly feeling with this Nephite. That's David Whitmer. It's awesome, isn't it?
Really
now,
awesome.
People ask me all the time, why did Joseph look pale, almost transparent? Why do you think? You might know because I've told you this. So we'll ask the audience, why did Joseph look pale? Why did he look pale?
I kind of know there.
Here's what I think. I think it's that Joseph had only seen the stone box up to this point. The Lord only told him what he needed to know. It's kind of a need-to-know basis, right, all the way through this. Right. So he said, all right, there's a stone box. It has the plates, the Urim and Thummim, the breastplate. That's all you need to know, Joseph. Just take those plates. And even those plates, he can't have for 4 years because that's a lot of gold in there. And I know that if you read Oliver Cowdery's account, Joseph was severely tempted.
Right.
He thought, well, okay, I know I can't sell the plates, but there's probably some other stuff in there I can sell, right? And so he had to spend 4 years to overcome that temptation to do something with the plates. Yeah. Finally, he got the plates. Takes them to Harmony, translates them, gives them to this messenger, knowing that the Lord told him he has to translate the plates of Nephi, but he had no idea where the plates of Nephi were. Yeah. Maybe he thought they were in Mexico.
Yes, Joseph probably thought that this was the extent of the gold.
Well, that's what it was originally.
And then all of a sudden this guy shows up in it, and all of a sudden Joseph is kind of putting one and two together, going, wait a minute.
That's right.
There's a whole repository?
Well, remember, they had just translated Mormon 6:6, where Mormon said, all the records I put in the Hill Cumorah. And Joseph knew that where the Hill Cumorah was. Yeah. So when this messenger said he was taking these plates to Cumorah, Joseph realized, well, whoa, that means that repository is over there. If this is $1 million, you're talking $1 billion.
There's so much possible gold there.
Yeah. And other treasures, maybe, you know. So I think that's why he went, what the, it's been there all this time, kind of thing. And it's also interesting that, we always hear the story of David Whitmer saying that Joseph had a spat with Emma and that he had to reconcile and he couldn't translate. But he also said there were times when Joseph's mind was preoccupied with things of the world. Mm-hmm. He didn't specify, but to me, that seems likely.
They were, let's face it, they were dirt poor.
They were poor.
And he couldn't even afford a wagon.
That's right. He had to borrow a wagon.
Or a team to even get back up there. He had to basically use someone else's.
And even here, he had to ask David Whitmer to come pick him up. So so he was poor. He felt like there had to be something in there he could sell. So his mind, he would get distracted from time to time. But here's the first time when it dawned on him that repository was there. And the Lord apparently had prepared him enough to handle it. Yeah. But he was still a challenge for him. So the same Edward Stevenson who interviewed him talked about this. This is another version of it. He said, while on the return journey from Palmyra, David noticed a somewhat aged-looking man who approached him on the road. He had a very pleasant face, about which, however, there seems something peculiar. So he also there's something weird about this guy, even though he was
probably looked Nephite-ish.
Yeah, he probably didn't. Think about it. He probably didn't look like a New Yorker. Let's put it that way. So there was something peculiar about this guy. Mm-hmm. And he carried a knapsack on his back, like he said before. David asked him to take a ride, but he declined, saying, "I'm going over to Cumorah," and then disappeared very suddenly, although there was no chance for him to secrete himself in the open country through which the party was passing. So there's something mysterious about this guy.
Yeah.
Then, though, they all felt very strange concerning this personage, and the prophet was besought. They asked him to inquire of the Lord concerning him. Shortly afterwards, David relates the prophet looked very white. Now, this is before he was pale. This time he's white, but it's the same idea.
Right.
But with a heavenly appearance. And Joseph said their visitor was one of the 3 Nephites.
Wow.
Right there. To whom the Savior gave the promise of life on earth until he should come in power.
So they were involved, and it would make perfect sense that this what more important thing that could they be involved with than securing
absolutely
the
plates
history.
That's right.
Their plates.
And there's a lot of, we could talk for a couple hours about the ramifications of this, but the key point is that this messenger that Joseph gave the plates to was one of the 3 Nephites. And the other 2, all 3 of them helped work on the farm. But one of them got down there before David. Joseph gave him the plates.
Yeah.
He took him to Cumorah, and then, this is cool too. So then they ended up continuing on the road, David and Joseph and Oliver. They arrived at the Peter Whitmer home, and shortly after they got there, Joseph met the messenger. Let's see, that's the one I already did. These are just some pictures of the Whitmer home, so you can see what it's like.
As it is today.
As it is today. This is the table where they would have, if it was this exact table. But this is the table in the room where Joseph did the demonstration with the stone and the hat.
Right.
So to satisfy their curiosity, kind of show them the process, because he couldn't show them the plates, couldn't show them the Urim and Thummim, but he could do the stone and the hat as here's a demonstration.
Yeah.
So that's where that happened in this room. Here's the upstairs room and so on. There's a visitor center there now.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And when we do the tours and go there, it's really nice. They have a big.
Yeah, they have a nice visitor center.
They actually done some general conference addresses from that.
They did,
from that location
it's
before.
The Centennial in 1980
it's
there.
Beautiful, yeah.
So it's a cool place. And so here's our diagram that shows the different routes. And if you watch, the messenger takes the plates of Nephi this time from the Hill Cumorah back to the farm in Fayette.
This is small plates of Nephi now.
Yeah, the small plates. Yeah. So the scriptures say plates of Nephi. We call them the small plates.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the room upstairs where Joseph and Oliver and the Whitmer brothers did the actual translation. Downstairs is when they did the demonstration. 2 different things. And if you want to know more about the detail of that, I have a copy of the book here. This is a man that can translate. There's more detail in here than we can go over during this. But the point is that now the messenger came back from Cumorah, and he had the plates of Nephi, the small plates. Let's say these are the small plates, Nephi. Mm-hmm. He met Joseph in the garden, but what did he do before that? He ran into Mary Whitmer, David Whitmer's mother, who was stressed by having him there. Maybe not before he gave the plates to Joseph, but at some time in there, we don't know exactly when. And he met Mary Whitmer, and he showed her the plates, and she said that he called himself Brother Nephi. Well, who were the 3 Nephites? They were among the 12 disciples in the Book of Mormon, one of whom's name was Nephi.
Yeah.
And so, and the Lord didn't allow Mormon to give us the names of the 3 out of the 12.
Yeah.
But
you got
a 25% chance, right? 3 out of 12. That Nephi was one of them, and that's how he identified himself to Mary Whitmer. And what happened is later in life, her grandson, because her account of this went through the family, her grandson said, well, she called him Brother Nephi, but she was wrong. It had to be Moroni because he was in charge of the plates. And ever since then, everybody says it was Moroni. But you just saw how David Whitmer said, Joseph said it was one of the 3 Nephites. It wasn't Moroni. And plus, we have the description of Moroni appearing to Joseph Smith. He was larger stature, glorious being. He wasn't some elderly... Not that there's anything wrong with being old. But he wasn't an old man, roughly age 70, because that's when they were transfigured.
So he's 5 foot 9 or so. He said
5 foot 8 or 9. Yeah.
So that's not really,
heavy set.
really tall or anything.
Heavy set with a big beard. I mean, all these pictures of Moroni. Could you imagine Joseph's reaction if an old heavy dude with a big beard showed up? And if that's the resurrected body, that's another can of worms, right? So we don't.
I don't want that one.
No, we don't want that one. And so it's a real serious kind of it's a small detail.
Yeah.
But what's happened is a lot of historians in the church have tried to what I call decorrelate this whole thing about Cumorah, right, in New York, because their friends say
all
it's
of this
Mexico.
really just flies in the face of so many things that we understand. They've literally tried to make it so that the Hill Cumorah in New York isn't the Hill Cumorah.
Right.
Not even give it an opportunity
right.
to be the Hill Cumorah. And it only really makes sense when you make it the Hill Cumorah is in New York.
Yeah. So what the upshot of all this is that when you read the original sources, you read what David Whitmer said several times. Mm-hmm. You read what Mary Whitmer actually said, not what her grandson said.
Yeah.
And you read, and now I don't want to get into more of that detail because we want to focus on the lesson this week. But the point is that the original sources in the Joseph Smith Papers, Church History Library, have these accounts, and they're crystal clear once you understand them. And that's why we encourage everybody watching this, don't take our word for it, go to the links and see it for yourself. Right. What we caution you against is reading someone else's interpretation of this. Because if you read it from the people who were involved, it's clear. Okay, so anyway, moving on from this. This will be a little summary of it. Joseph and Oliver translated the small plates in Fayette, which was First Nephi through Words of Mormon. Mm-hmm. And where did they get the plates of Nephi? From the messenger who brought them from the Hill Cumorah, the repository in Cumorah. So here's the diagram. We'll just summarize it quickly. The repository had all the original records of the Nephites. That's what Mormon described in Mormon 6:6. Mormon did an abridgment of the large plates of Nephi, which included the book of Lehi and all the rest. Then he gave those plates to Moroni. Moroni did the abridgment of Ether. And his own writing, did the title page, put those in the stone box. Joseph Smith got the plates from the stone box, took them to Harmony, translated the entire thing, gave them to the messenger. Messenger took those plates back to the Hill Cumorah because the Lord, in the meantime, had told Joseph he had to translate the plates of Nephi, but he didn't have the plates of Nephi. So the messenger took them to Cumorah. Messenger picked up the plates of Nephi from Cumorah, took them to Fayette, and that's why he translated them at Fayette, as it shows on the diagram here. Then, we already talked about that. Okay, so our current Book of Mormon, this is important for people to understand.
Yes.
This is the composition of our current Book of Mormon as it is today, which I don't know if we have a copy right here, but yeah, right here. So here's a replica of the 1830 Book of Mormon. And it starts with the small plates of Nephi because that's chronological, but that's not the order in which it was translated. Right. So here's the order in which it was translated, so you can see it. Small plates of Nephi, which came directly from the Hill Cumorah. Then the abridged record, as you can see how the diagram flows it out. Mm-hmm. So it all makes perfect sense. But you remember, I think there's another one on here we want to look at. Okay, so here's a nice little simple summary of this whole thing. It's the traditional assumption is the small plates were inserted with the large plates with the plates of ether thrown into the gold plates.
They're all into the 3-ring binder, as I call it.
Yeah, the 3-ring binder.
Yeah.
And then Joseph translated those to the Book of Mormon. But when you look in the historical evidence and use some common sense, like looking at the title page, you can see that what we really have is the large plates and the plates of ether were abridged, put in the stone box.
Into the 3-ring binder.
The 3-ring binder.
Yep.
Then that was all translated in Harmony, Pennsylvania. Then Joseph gave those plates to the messenger. Let's say you're the messenger. Mm-hmm. You
take
haul
those
them
plates.
off. I should have handed you those.
So I'll take them right here. So I take. Okay. So I'm the messenger.
I get them from the stone box.
Stone box. Yep.
I translate. Then I give to you.
And I take these 60-pound plates.
Right.
In a knapsack. Back up to Cumorah.
Right.
And then I drop these off.
Drop them off.
Okay, good. These are safe now.
Right.
Not to worry about it. I need to get those other set of plates to Joseph. So they get this other set of plates. So
Okay.
Other sets of plates.
Other sets of plates. The small plates.
The small plates. And I take these from the repository, and I take them to Fayette and hand them off.
Give them to me.
To you.
First, you show them to Mary Whitmer, too.
Yeah.
But then you give them to me.
Yeah.
And me and Oliver and the Whitmer brothers, John and Christian, sit there, and I use the Urim and Thummim, because I didn't give you the Urim and Thummim. Nothing said that the Urim and Thummim, the messenger had the Urim and Thummim. So I apply it to my eyes, look on the plates, dictate the translation. And then, now, this is a little bit outside the lesson, but let's talk about what happened to these plates.
Yeah, and who saw
There you
which sets of plates?
That's right.
If there was 2 sets of plates,
that's a future lesson.
that's an awesome lesson.
We're going to save that for the future.
And that actually, so let's just kind of do a quick wrap up. So if you want to learn more about this, Jonathan, so you can go to Whatever Happened to the Gold Plates, the book. You can also get the DVD as well that goes through this information here in even more detail than what we've way more detail because these are longer. They can also go to reference. This is kind of the Master Blaster, I guess you would say, maybe.
Well, this is the one about the translation.
Okay, that's right.
Now, I actually did 3 books for this year.
Okay.
And there's a slide here that's up here.
Available yet?
Well, it'll be by
Soon.
the time they watch this.
That's true. It will be. Yeah. Hopefully.
Tomorrow.
Okay. And that one's called?
Well, there's 3.
Between These Hills.
Here's a slide of it that shows.
Okay, there we go.
It's got Between These Hills is the book about the Hill Cumorah. It's a case for the New York Cumorah. And I talk about explaining these 2 sets of plates and how this all worked out, as well as the other external evidence for the Hill Cumorah and so on. The one we talked about last week was A Man That Can Translate, about the Urim and Thummim and so on. The last one on here is Infinite Goodness, and that talks about the language of the Book of Mormon and how it came from Joseph Smith's own, what was in his mind, because of things that he had
His personal vocabulary.
His personal vocabulary, what I call his mental language bank. Because I like to think of it as every time you learn a new word as a child or an adult, you make a deposit in your mental language bank. And it in a way, if you've ever learned a foreign language or something and you learn a new word, all of a sudden you hear it all the time, that's because when you learn the word, it unlocks the key to that vault that has the word in it, sort of. And so there's nothing you can say or write or translate unless you already have those words in your head somewhere. Because I've translated things in different languages, and I know if I have an original French text into English or English into French, either way, I have to have that vocabulary and the concepts and the phrases in my mind in order to translate it.
And that makes perfect sense also when you consider, for example, you read the writings of the Founding Fathers and so forth. And their vocabularies were just massive compared to what our today the average person's vocabulary is. And you see that in their writings and
it was just common to them.
Words that we don't even hear anymore today. They use fairly commonly. Yeah.
And it was common among the other Christian authors that Joseph said he had an intimate acquaintance with. And so in that book I talk about all the language of the Book of Mormon. But these were all intended for focusing on church history, a faithful explanation that's faithful to what Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery said from the beginning, their entire lives. Because to me, a lot of what they call the New Mormon history, the new ideas that are driven largely by the geographical considerations, they don't make sense, but they're not consistent with the historical record anyway. So I say, let's look at the original documents, what Oliver Cowdery, Joseph Smith, David Whitmer, Martin Harris, what all those people said, and then try to make sense of it. So one last little point on this. Remember at the beginning when we talked about there were different weights for the plates? People had different dimensions? How could that be? Think about it.
Well, some people just must not be spatially recognizing
it could be.
The size and shape of plates.
But we're pretty confident.
These people are pretty smart. I mean, they knew what 6 inches by 6 inches, whatever. They knew those.
And they knew weights
pretty
so
easily,
And so it appears from the record that Moroni, when he showed the plates to the 3 witnesses, it was this.
It was these plates.
And here's an interesting side element of this. Where there's 2 places in the Book of Mormon that talk about witnesses, right? 3 witnesses.
And then the 8 witnesses.
Yeah, but where does it talk about the 3 witnesses?
So
it talks about
tell
an
me.
ether. It talks about an ether, and in
Okay, yeah.
and in Second Nephi both.
Uh-huh.
And we're starting to digress. The point is that there were two different sets of witnesses. One saw the abridged plates, the other saw the plates of Nephi. And Brigham Young explained this because he said Joseph Smith took the plates back to the Hill Cumorah, to the repository. So if you read Joseph Smith's history, he says he talks about the abridged plates because he got them from the stone box. He gave them to a messenger. When you read about the 8 witnesses, Lucy Mack says Joseph got those plates from a messenger.
Mm-hmm.
And Brigham Young says he took them back to the Hill Cumorah.
So that was probably the small set.
The small plates are the ones...
And this is too small of a set here, obviously, but...
Yeah. The small plates are the ones the 8 witnesses saw. And notice none of them said that there was a sealed portion.
There's been some critics of the Book of Mormon who have actually said, well, here your 2 sets of witnesses, they don't even agree on what the plates look like and their dimensions and so forth and their weight.
Yeah.
And so this also now explains that.
That's right.
They're not the same because they were not witnessing the same set of plates. The 3 witnesses were seeing this, the 8 witnesses were seeing that.
Right. And the 8 witnesses didn't say anything about a sealed portion. They said they flipped through them, right? Mm-hmm. No sealed portion. There wasn't a sealed portion in the plates of Nephi. The sealed portion was in the abridged plates.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's a lot more about this, but hopefully that's tantalizing enough that you can read it for yourself and figure it out, and it's really exciting.
Yeah. And by the way, if you'd like to have some additional information about the Hill Cumorah and some of the archaeological things, we're going to be referencing this several times over the next few weeks here too. But it's a DVD. It's called The Hill Cumorah: Verifications and Realistic Archaeological Expectations, which has a lot of the quotes from the prophets about the Hill Cumorah in New York being the actual hill of the Nephites. So it's very consistent throughout. And in fact, there's even President Joseph Fielding Smith said that for over upwards of 100 years. The Hill Cumorah being in New York was a given. It was a established fact of the church history. So
we'll talk about. But for now, we're talking about how the Book of Mormon is translated. But even more importantly, remember what the lesson talked about: how just a small little thing can cause big implications in the future, and also that the Lord will give you direction if you seek it. And I love this account because Joseph was given a commandment, translate the plates of Nephi. He didn't know how he would do it. So what does Nephi said? Nephi explained that the Lord will make things possible for you to accomplish his purposes, right? So he made it possible by having the messenger take those abridged plates, going to Cumorah, which Joseph couldn't do, bringing them over. So the messenger provided, it's kind of like the lamb at Abraham's sacrifice, right? Yeah. When Joseph needed the plates of Nephi and Fayette, the Lord provided them. Yeah. But he had to be responsible for taking care of them and so on, showing them to the witnesses and taking them back to the repository.
Okay, so to finish this up, what happened to the small set of plates?
Well, Joseph took them back to the repository.
All right, there we go.
That's what Brigham Young said. That's why, in church history, there's this conflict between what Brigham Young said, Joseph took him back to the repository. Joseph Smith himself said, I gave him to the messenger. That's 2 different things. But when you understand there's 2 different sets of plates, and so they were both literally true.
Yeah, this one went back to the messenger.
Yep.
These went back
to the repository
directly.
And even by the way, Oliver Cowdery said the first time they went more than once.
Yeah.
First time they went, remember this sort of label sheet, and the second time it wasn't, and all that. So if you don't know what we're talking about,
there were wagon loads of plates. They talked about there was as many wagon loads of plates within the repository. Well, that's a long ways down to Central America if the repository's down there.
Well, we don't care about Central America. That's all behind us at this point.
That's the old.
But the cool thing is, there's a lot of lessons we can each draw from this in our personal lives about how the Lord works with us. He asks us to do. He gives us a commandment, asks us to fulfill it. We do everything we can. He makes up the difference.
Yeah.
By grace, we're saved after all we can do, and by grace, the Book of Mormon was translated after all Joseph could do. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the message we want to leave with you. Yep. And we'll see you next week, or some of us will.
We'll have more. Again, for more information, I want you to go to our websites, basically. Right. So we have bookofmormonevidence.org is the primary website that's kind of the clearinghouse of lots of different things. But then also, We have the Come Follow Me 2021.
Right.
.org and .com.
Right.
.org is basically your
blog
kind of keeping
commentaries
a
and
lot of
notes
commentaries and so
right.
forth on that. So you can go there for additional information. You can watch the podcast. We hope that you will share this with lots of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Our goal this year is to have a lot more people being able to see these and make them available.
Right.
But also, if you want to know more information about these things, Jonathan has had numerous times that he's spoken at
your conference.
conferences,
that's right.
and all of that is on the Book of Mormon Evidence streaming.
Yep.
Which has over 700 hours of the most intensive research on the Book of Mormon that's ever been really assembled in the church. So that's another. I think that's a subscription site that you can go to if you really want to get some in-depth stuff.
Yeah.
And then you'll see there's over 200 presenters, I should say. And that should wrap it up.
That should wrap it up. Till next time.
Till next time.
Great to be here with you.
I hope you're enjoying these, and I sure am enjoying and learning and so forth as we go through these things. Folks, have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Okay.
Thank you for listening today. We are also gearing up for the next Book of Mormon Virtual Expo. Go to bookofmormonevidence.org for more information.
The days ahead are sobering and challenging, and will demand the faith, prayers, and loyalty of every American. May God give us the wisdom to recognize the dangers of complacency, the threat to our freedom, and the strength to meet this danger courageously. As the ancient apostle declared, the night is far spent, the day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light. Our challenge is to keep America strong and free. Strong socially. Strong economically. And above all, strong spiritually. If our way of life is to endure. There is no other way.
With over 700 videos that are inspiring, you can fortify your family and friends by putting on the armor of light at bookofmormonevidencestreaming.com.